Welcome to the media, the journalists who are present, and also a warm welcome to all the other representatives of organizations and institutions. I see also the delegation of the European Union in the Gambia. Thank you very much for attending our press conference. I want to introduce my colleagues here on the table. Next to me, you see Anne Marlborough. She's our electoral expert, electoral analyst who was here last year. You know already Chief Observer Norbert Neuser. In the middle, from Germany, he is a former member of the European Parliament. And at the left side, it's Rini Skuzu. She's our legal expert, our legal analyst. She was also part of the mission last year. You remember, we have been here last year for the presidential election for December. We came in last October 27, and we stayed until Christmas last year, and then we left because we were also happy to go back to our families. But the team was working hard during that time, the last 2.5 months, and finalized this report we want to present today. This is the final report of the election observation mission last year, and this morning we want to present the summary of it and some recommendations that are for consideration. The game is like this today. We will present our findings and the report today with the recommendations. After that, we will give some space for you to the journalists, but only the journalists because we have only limited time. So this is a press conference, and if you have questions after this presentation, it will be a lot of stuff to digest, I know. Maybe you have some questions. If you have, please ask them right after we had our presentation. If there will come up some questions later, please don't hesitate to contact us, and we will try to answer those questions even later. There are some hard copies of this final report. You can get one per media outlet because there's only limited amount of these material here in hard copy. But don't worry, because I will send around the digital version to you. So you will get it as a PDF file via email. You can also download this final report on our website, and you will find it probably also on Facebook and Twitter. So please be careful with this. We don't have a lot. Be fair. There will be also a press release at the exit when you leave. My colleague is sitting there. There are printed versions of the press release, but also the press release I will send around later to you as a PDF file to your email addresses. So you will have everything, even if you don't get a printed version today. Okay, enough of this introduction. I want to hand over now to our Chief Observer, Norbert Neuser, who will present now the final report of our mission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The European Union deployed an election observation mission to observe the presidential election in the Gambia following an invitation from the IEC. The European Union election observation mission present from 27th of October to 24th of December last year. The mission's mandate was to observe all aspects of the electoral process and assess the extent to which the election complied with regional and international commitments for elections, as well as with national legislation. The European Union election observation mission comprised a core team of 16 experts based in Banjul and 16 long-term observers deployed to all areas of your country. For the election day on 4th of December, the EU observation mission deployed 16 additional locally recruited short-term observers to monitor polling, counting, and collation of the results. In total, the European observation mission deployed 40 observers from 17 EU member states, as well as from partner countries, Canada, Norway, and Switzerland. Let me talk now about the mission's final report. After 22 years of dictatorship, the 4th of December presidential election was the first fully contested presidential race since former President Jammeh's departure in January 2017. The election took place in a competitive and vibrant campaign environment, with all candidates meeting with voters throughout the country to convey their messages. It was characterized by a growing democratic tendency, including a strengthening judiciary and increased ability for citizens to express themselves. Important shortcomings remained, however, and there has been a delay in the realization of fundamental reforms. Ladies and gentlemen, this leads me to the aspect of international standards. The Gambia has acceded to most key international and regional standards. The legal framework provides a minimal basis for conducting democratic elections. Nevertheless, numerous gaps and ambiguities in this framework, coupled with limited accessibility to legal text, creates uncertainty and reduces transparency. With comprehensive constitutional and electoral reform not yet having materialized, significant reforms are crucial. Restrictions on fundamental rights as well as arcane laws are consistent with international and regional standards. Furthermore, the mission recommends reforms in the area of challenges to candidate nomination, campaign finance, and women's participation. Yesterday, we had a constructive meeting with the Independent Electoral Commission, and we have delivered the mission's final report. The duties of the Independent Electoral Commission are broad, while the capacity of the institution is very modest. Structural reforms is required, particularly in the creation of legal and gender divisions within the institution. Improvements in communication and transparency are recommended to facilitate better engagement with stakeholders. Importantly, the independence of the IEC is not protected under present constitutional arrangements. Legal reform is required to comply with regional and international standards. Biometric voter registration, for which a photograph and both thumbprints were recorded, took place from 29 May to 11 of July, prior to the EU election observation mission. Registration figures were disaggregated by gender and age for the first time. Women comprised 57% of registrants, while young people between 18 and 35 comprised 58%. Registration was conducted within the 53 National Assembly constituencies. The diaspora was not included, despite a 2021 Supreme Court ruling upholding the obligation of the IEC to register them. The IEC announced that just 6 nominations had been accepted. The other 15 aspirants had been rejected. There had been a brief period of public scrutiny during which objections to candidacies could be made by voters. Interested parties, however, were granted access for just 5 minutes. This exercise was not meaningful, as voters did not have a real opportunity to scrutinize the documentation and gather the information required to make grounded objections. The presidential election took place in a competitive and vibrant campaign environment. Throughout the campaign, freedoms were largely respected and the campaign was peaceful without serious incidents of violence. Overall, the campaigning was issue-based, also highly personalized. Throughout the country, campaigns met with voters extensively at large rallies in town, down to small meetings at the village level. Women took an active part, although they were rarely in leadership positions. The distribution of goods and misuse of state resources impacted negatively on the campaign. The distribution of various goods was directly observed by the EU Electoral Observation Mission at several rallies held by the incumbent parties. There were also widespread allegations of distributions of money through village chiefs reported to the EU Electoral Observation Mission's observers. If true, these practices are in breach of the IEC code. However, no action was observed to have been taken by its representatives. Overall, the campaign costs were very high, with the NPP spending far more on political publicity than on any other campaign. Lack of campaign finance regulation added to an unlevel playing field. Political party and campaign finance remain largely unregulated. The overall lack of transparency and accountability of campaign resources and expenditures disadvantaged candidates with less financial resources. It also limited voters' ability to make a fully informed choice. The inequity of access and spending in terms of political finance led to an unlevel playing field between contestants. The Constitution and the legal framework overall significantly limit freedom of expression. However, on the ground, interlocutors confirmed that the ability of speak freely has considerably improved since 2017, and Gambians without fear discussed openly their political preferences throughout the campaign period. The allocation of broadcasting licenses to business holdings threatens a diversity of view in the long run. The Gambia radio and television services covered the campaign in line with its obligations. Commercial TV, however, displayed significant bias towards the incumbent, granting him undue advantage. The media monitoring of the EU Electoral Observation Mission showed that the legal framework also unduly restricts freedom of expression online and does not guarantee a genuine independence of the public utilities regulatory authority. Privacy and personal data are not protected. The 2021 Access to Information Act, if properly implemented, will broaden the scope of information that government institutions, including the IEC, must publish online. Such enhanced transparency should reduce adverse effects of disinformation. Facebook, with some 500,000 users, was the prime discussion forum on the election and shaped the political discourse online and offline. False information and divisive tribal rhetoric migrated between Facebook and WhatsApp. Facebook did too little, too late to effectively counter damaging practices on the platform. Consequently, this information confused voters, and tribal rhetoric as such shrank the space of fact-based debate. Positively, national fact-checking and investigative online journalism helped identify disinformation for voters to make an informed choice, thus enhancing transparency. Women were active throughout the process, also their role in the presidential race was limited. None of the presidential candidates was female, while one woman aspiring to nomination did not qualify. Despite some legislative progress, further affirmative action is needed to address barriers to political participation for marginalized groups, including women, youth, and persons with disabilities. On election day, voter turnout was extremely high, reaching 89% during a polling day, which was calm across the country. The overall performance of polling staff was assessed as very good in almost 2/3 of the EU election observation mission observations. Polling and counting were observed to be technically well administered, while the transparency of the process was assessed as high. Procedures, particularly for counting and collation, were not well elaborated and were not always completely followed. Candidate agents were present in all polling stations visited, while citizens observers also participated visibly. More than a third of polling stations visited were not assessed as accessible to persons of limited mobility. Also, no formal dispute resolution mechanism applies for all stages of the process. Electoral cases filed on rejections of nominations were treated as a priority by the High Court. While electoral offenses are listed in the Election Act, they are nevertheless not sufficiently prosecuted to act as an effective deterrent. I now want to talk about our recommendations. The mission has looked at how electoral rights of the Gambian people under national law and Gambia's international commitments have been upheld. Our report and the accompanying 20 recommendations are the result of a comprehensive observation of the electoral process. They include 7 priority recommendations I want to mention here. The first one, make essential changes in the electoral legal framework. Bring the draft Election Act in line with international standards. Streamline provisions of the draft Constitution and the draft Election Act, as well as other acts relevant to the conduct of elections. Increase IEC capacity and transparency in critical areas, including the establishment of specialized divisions, legal, gender, within the IEC. The IEC should publish the complete presidential election results, disaggregated by polling stations, on its website without delay. In all future elections, disaggregated results should be released during the tabulation process. Legal provisions should be made for continuous registration and updating the voter register to allow for the removal of deceased voters, inclusion of citizens who will turn 18 prior to the election, and transfer of place of registration for people who have moved. Bring the legal framework, including the Constitution, the Criminal Court, and the Information and Communications Act, in line with the country's international and regional commitment on freedom of expression. Introduce a detailed and comprehensive complaints procedure throughout the electoral process with reasonable time limits for adjudication, regulating matters such as format and venue, including for the implementation of the Code on Election Campaign Ethics. Formalize clear and coherent procedures for pooling, counting, result transfer, and collation in conjunction with the introduction of improved security measures of result and collation forms. Ladies and gentlemen, what will happen now? We had already meetings with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the IEC yesterday. Today and the upcoming days, we will have more appointments with political parties, civil society groups, and other stakeholders. The mission looks forward to discussing the recommendation during an upcoming roundtable event with several Gambian stakeholders in detail and prospects for their implementation. Finally, it is up to the Gambian authorities and stakeholders to consider these recommendations. There are also other recommendations of the Gambian citizen observers which observed the elections. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention and for attending our press conference. Thank you.